Good afternoon, passengers. Welcome to Martel Air. My name's Amanda, and I'll be your pilot for today. We're just beginning boarding for flight number 26 from Lockhart River to Horn Island, so grab your seats while I finish up the last steps of the pre-flight inspections of this Cessna Grand Caravan, the pride of the Martel Air fleet. And it is a bit windy outside by the sounds of it. That's a little odd. There we go. Before engine start checklist. Pre-flight inspections complete. Parking brake handle is set. Electrical system switches off. Ignition switch normal. Fuel tank selectors both on. Bleed air heat switch off. Power lever idle. Prop RPM lever max. Fuel condition lever cut off. Fuel shut-off knob verify fully in check. Battery switch on. Cabin lights on. Cockpit lighting set. Flaps up. No smoking lights on. Before engine start checklist complete. Good afternoon, passengers. The weather today is sunny but rather windy, and we'll be cruising at an altitude of somewhere around 8,000 feet as we fly up to the very tip of the Cape York Peninsula. Your cabin crew today is me, assisted as always by my co-pilot or Wing Commander Lamington. And your emergency exits are located to the back of the cabin where you entered the plane. I also have a door up here by me, and if you see me leave, please follow me quickly. Our in-flight catering services are provided by our wonderful passengers, so I hope you pack something interesting. We also have a coffee machine in the back, so for those who'd like to support the channel and Wing Commander Lamington's dog treats habit. And hello, favourite passenger Piney Tree. I'm just working out where that one weird setting is that made something flash up on my screen just now. But anyway. Yes, we will be flying up to the very tip of the Cape York Peninsula and into the Torres Strait today. Engine start checklist. Battery switch on. Beacon lights on. Avionics 1 on. Bus fault check. Emergency power lever normal. Inertial separator handle bypass. EIS readings check. Propeller area clear. Fuel boost switch on. Fuel boost on shown check. Fuel pressure low not shown check. Fuel flow 0 check. Starter switch start. Ignition on shown check. Oil PSI climbing check. NG stable. Fuel condition low idle. Fuel flow and expected range check. NG climbing. NG stable. Starter switch off. EIS readings in a normal range. Check. Generator load. Check. Battery amps positive. Check. Fuel boost switch. Normal. Avionics 2 on. And nav lights on. Engine start checklist complete. We're now ready for departure, so please fasten your seatbelts and turn off your devices, apart from those used to watch this stream. Thank you for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Okay, how are things looking at our tiny little airstrip today? Oh, we've even got a windsock. So let's get that back to topographic. And so the windsock is blowing. Oh yeah, it's currently 26 degrees outside the plane. And yeah, dusty is about the normal expected condition. And we've got a lovely visible windsock showing a bit of a wind going there, but luckily it's looking fairly in line with the runway. So that's going to be runway 12, I believe, is our best option for that, because you always want to face into the wind. Okay, before departure taxi checklist. Taxi recognition lights on, seatbelt lights on. Taxi clearance. Lockhart River traffic, Martel 26 is taxiing to runway 12 for takeoff. Taxi clearance check. Nav source set. Prop RPM to minimum. Fuel condition low idle. Inertial separator bypass. And parking brake off. For departure taxi checklist complete. So we've just got the one other plane to worry about. So easing off on the brakes and pulling back on the propeller. And not using the brakes while travelling backwards. That goes poorly. And looks like we're going to have a short back taxi before we do our takeoff. That's fine. But we will stop here. Before takeoff checklist. Parking brake set. Altimeter QNH set. Standby flight instruments check. Fuel boost switch normal. Fuel tank selectors both on. Fuel quantity check. Fuel shut-off knob fully in check. Standby alt power on. Anti-ice system utterly not required. Inertial separator handle bypass. Autopilot. I think I might actually fly this one manually just for the bit of change from the normal procedures. That should be a bit fun. Nav source is set. Transponder on alt. Flaps to a takeoff position. Takeoff clearance. River traffic, Martel 26, entering runway 12 for takeoff, departure to the north. Takeoff clearance check. Landing lights on, taxi lights off, strobe lights on, parking brake released, fuel condition high idle, and prop RPM to max. Ready for takeoff. Before takeoff checklist complete. Yeah, since it's been a while since I've done too much hand flying of things, I think a yeah, chili pepper for me making a bit of a spicy decision. But I think it should make things a little more interesting rather than me zoning out and getting distracted by the conversation, since I've not done too much hand flying of late outside of takeoff and landing. And we're going to do the turn properly this time by making sure that we do not overrun the edges of the runway. And of course this thing has an utterly tiny turning circle. If you're going full turning power, it will essentially pivot on one of the two main wheels. Okay, ready for takeoff. The flaps are in the takeoff position, and power lever gently advances to takeoff thrust. Little bit bumpy, and rotate, and we're flying. So as we climb out, we're holding VX or somewhere near to it for maximum climb away from all of these lovely trees. And as we clear 1,000 feet, flaps up, stabilize. just tuning to the next radio. Brisbane Centre, Martel 26, type Cessna Caravan, 2 miles southeast of Lockhart River, 1,600 feet, request flight following. Squawk 0711, Martel 26. Okay. So we bring the nose down a little and try to climb to VY, which is our general climbing speed. And we begin a nice wide turn to our nav path. And the winds are a little spicy, but that's nothing to worry about. Especially now that we're not on the ground anymore. So yes, I'm sorry for missing the last week's stream. Unfortunately, the week before that, when I was off helping a friend move house, I also managed to injure myself fairly significantly, and that plus a few other things utterly wiped everything out of my energy budget. It's amazing how much an injured knee will turn any bit of moving about into a full body exercise. Surprisingly, my knee is actually most of the way recovered despite only being 2 weeks on from it, which is a lot faster than my normal recovery rate. I'm usually fairly slow to recover from joint injuries, but I suppose being relatively heavily dosed on anti-inflammatories and anti-arthritis meds is actually having some effects, and also just, properly focusing on resting and not exacerbating the injury all seems to have come together fairly well. Essentially, my knee tried to flex sideways, which I did not enjoy. Okay, and we are outside of the traffic area, so the landing lights off. Inertial separator handle normal. Now, temperature range for the not exceed on climb, it's 825, so we are in acceptable climb thrust. He's back on the prop RPM limit. So, one of the things that I am looking at as a positive is it could have been a lot worse, because what actually happened is my bad ankle tried to roll inwards as I was stepping down off something that was about 20 centimeters, 4 inches higher than my brain registered it as, because sloping ground with moving blankets strewn across it. So as my ankle rolled, it pulled the bottom of my leg one way, and the knee, because it was happening fairly briskly and with my body weight behind it, my knee tried to just kind of keep going the way it had been going, and that involved flexing inwards ever so slightly. But because of the boots that I've gotten and have been long referring to as medically necessary for stopping me rolling my ankle, I rolled my ankle with my full body weight behind it on a relatively significant drop, and only got a quite minor sprain to the ankle. So if I'd not been wearing my boots, I'm pretty sure it would have been a broken ankle and bruised knee ligament. So, yeah, let's hear it for Doc Martens. For reference, this is the ankle that, until I got the Doc Martens, I first rolled it badly in year 6, so when I was 12, and badly sprained, if not broken, at least once every 18 months ever since. But this is the first time anything's happened to it since I got the boots. Which is kind of wild. And of course, the thing I found most frustrating at the time was I was stepping down. So, I'd gone over to help move furniture as somebody with a large car and trailer and the ability to drive said things. Stepping down off the vehicle currently being loaded when I got there, first bit of furniture since I'd arrived, and that's when my knee went. And I landed directly in front of the vehicle being loaded and directly in front of the door into the house. So, maximum unhelpful. Oh, and that's quite the crosswind we're flying through at the moment. Yes, off to our right we still have yet more of the Great Barrier Reef, which I believe we will be running out of at some point this flight, because we will be reaching the Torres Strait. And there we've got our 8,000 feet, so cruise checklist. Seatbelt lights, I think we're going to be predicting a bit of turbulence with these crosswinds, so that's staying on. Anti-ice, not required. Inertial separator handle is normal. Ooh. Plane is trying to pitch up severely if I look away for a second. Power lever. Setting for 87%. And prop RPM setting for 1750. Okay. Fuel balance check. And engine temperature range. Checkity check check. Now, one of the fun things, of course, is with that level of crosswind, we can't in fact aim down the flight path we want to take. We need to aim off to one side of it. Okay. And just lightly adjusting trim. After I pushed the trim down fairly heavily all at once when it pulled up because I looked away for a second. Going to 135.3 Martel 26. Goodbye. Brisbane Centre, Martel 26, entering your airspace 8,000 feet. Okay. Once it's all trimmed out and just holding itself nice and steady, it's a lovely moment. Getting the engine balance just so. Yes, it's been an interesting couple of weeks as I deal with the knee injury and recovery process, because luckily I am fairly well set up for joint injuries between, knee braces, ankle braces, cane, all that sort of thing. But yeah, it does turn walking into a whole body exercise when you're putting half the weight that would usually be going through one leg through arm and shoulder instead. And carrying anything when one hand is entirely dedicated to the cane. Those crosswinds also want to tip the wings up, which is going to be fun. But luckily we're into the pay lots of attention stage rather than the hand fly intensely at every moment stage. Yes, I have been pondering over whether there's anything I want to change about the streams to make them more interesting, more engaging, other production changes, because I know that the relaxed, not excitable Twitch streamer sort of energy is not the most popular kind of content, as we can clearly see. So yes, I'm just pondering over whether there's anything that I should be changing over the next little while to make these streams go a little better. I've been just, when the energy in the rest of life is low, it can make the streams a little lower energy, and that nose wants to keep rising. Make the energy to put towards the streams a little harder to come by, and I'm just trying to think, so, if you have any suggestions of things I could be changing about how I do the streams, what I do on the streams, I would be curious to hear. Getting shouty is not on the table, but something tells me that getting shouty is probably not going to be that appealing, because there are much more interesting people to get shouty for those who like shouty. Hmm. I mean, I would be, very, very pleased by checklist completion emojis. Don't know that that builds interest so much as just gives people something to do when I get to the end of some checklist content. I think it's more in the terms of engagement, as in just being more interesting. If there's things I should be doing in that sort of area. The fact that I say that immediately before going quiet as I concentrate on the flying for a moment is definitely something that strikes me as irony. I think there was some sentence structure problems in that because I got distracted halfway through the sentence, talking about getting distracted. I mean, that's a good point. Asking the audience that is already engaged how to increase engagement is a selected audience. Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. Brand and vibe is definitely something I've been working at building, of just the chill flying with ADHD, autism info dump time. And, the sort of people who are into, aeronautical history. I mean, there's some really good channels for that who are not trying to talk and fly at the same time. The Australian geography ones have been rather fun. Will require me to remember to do the research about where we're going a bit more in advance. The ones that were the videos that were down in southeastern Australia, where I could just do those off the cuff. That's because that's the area of Australia that I live in. I do like the approach of keep doing the thing and just let it become brand. That's certainly one way to go about, and we can just look at the earlier flights where there's a little bit less of the live viewers as building a back catalogue of videos for people to watch later once they get hooked and then want more before the next episode. So, that will be an interesting one to ponder. And I think looking at each quieter at the time stream as building the back catalogue stream is going to be a useful thing for just keeping my energy up as I'm going. Yes, true, also good for people who don't want to be dealing with me talking back to them as much as me talking back to people does make the rambling easier. I think doing a little bit of experimentation with the length of streams may also be something I need to look at, because the lengths have been creeping up of late, just because we get distracted with the talking, and we're trying to get this flight all around the coast of Australia done or the world ends, which, we're doing okay so far. So this is flight 26 out of the entire Martel Air suite. I can't remember when we started the coast circling. But at least a dozen flights as we just head up north along the coast. And the next few are going to be the hour-ish long flights, just purely by dint of how far it is between airports that are big enough to consider as good landing options. Looks like we've got about another 36 minutes before we get to Horn Island. So one of the reasons that I'm excited to reach the Torres Strait, which is the narrow part of water between the northern tip of Eastern Australia and Papua New Guinea, is that is... Okay, so actually, two things. One, the Torres Strait is a different overarching cultural group to the other Australian Indigenous communities. So, within the Australian Aboriginal group, there's something like 200 nations at least. Indigenous Australia is more diverse in about the same amount of land than Europe. More languages, more cultures, which all just kind of gets blurred together in the outside view into Australian Aboriginal. But the Torres Strait Islander peoples are a separate group from that. The exact details of how that works, I am so not qualified to offer insight on, but a lot of the time when especially in the names of organizations for the various Indigenous affairs, so cultural affairs, health, all this sort of stuff, the formally correct term, as it's considered at the moment, is actually Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, ATSI. They are sufficiently different that they get a parallel listing alongside Australian Aboriginal, which I think is fascinating. And the other fascinating thing that I think you will enjoy in particular is some of the cultural influences of Torres Strait Islander peoples. They are essentially part of one corner of the Pacific Islander. I think it's is it Polynesian Triangle, Melanesian Triangle, one of the two. But essentially, one of the things about Torres Strait Islander cultural stuff is that rather than being Australian continental cultural stuff, it's South Pacific. It is one of the influences that gets added up together into the White Sea Islanders. There are some lovely artworks from there that are held by the the National Museum of Australia. And when Victoria came to Australia for a visit, it was one of the places that we made sure to take her. So one of the things they have is a smaller scale. It's not a replica, it's a modern built, and built specifically for the museum boat. So rather than having cultural artifact boat that was held for dubious museum reasons, or modern replica made by the museum, it's modern replica made in culture for the museum. And they also have some of the traditional headdresses, which I think are the same category. So, got a lovely picture of Victoria Goddard in front of that boat. It's got the outrigger, it's got the crab claw sail, which I love crab claw sails. They are a very cool piece of technology. I don't know how familiar you are with how crab claw sails work, but I'm happy to ramble about those too. Ooh, we have crept up to about 9,000 feet. Let's just to ease back on that. So, a crab claw sail. It's something that is found mostly actually just among numerous Pacific Islander groups. It's the sort of sail where it's on 2 poles instead of 1. Usually one will be more of the mast than the other, but it is specifically the type where it is wider at the top. Sometimes it's trapezoid, sometimes it's fully triangular, but if you think of a modern European triangular sail, the wide bit is at the bottom and the top is just going to a point. Which, is fine. It means that the highest amount of pressure on the mast is not on the very tip of the mast at the end of the lever. So, you can put more force through it before you overstress the mast. Whereas with a crab claw sail, where the widest part and thus the greatest gathering of wind pressure is at the top, you can't actually put as much force through it. But if you're taking a relatively small boat, and not that some of these count as small by any means, some of them are utterly ridiculous. But if you're taking a boat that is small relative to the waves it's going through, having the biggest wind gathering area at the top of the mast means that more of the sail is above the general level of the waves. So when the seas are getting a bit choppy and would otherwise start to block your sail, which is entirely a thing that can happen on the open ocean, especially the largest ocean on the planet, instead of having the waves blocking your ability to get any wind on the sails, you can just kind of reach above them and just more wind. It's a really clever solution to a problem that the European approach of the same time would be to over-engineer. But instead it's just, well, that's the bit of the mast where the wind is. Let's put more sail on that bit. So, like, if you're used to looking at European sail designs, crab claw sails can look like they're put on upside down. Like, sail design in general has a lot of different complexities and things you can do. Like, one of the reasons that the big European square rig ships have multiple heights of sail all going at once is that sometimes they'll only have the topsails, which are generally called topsails, extended, just because that's the only bit that's getting hit with wind at the moment. And it's actually the same with outriggers and related things, which is, an outrigger is just, you've got another bit of the boat off to one side, because keeping a sailboat stable is really hard, because you've got this long lever at the top trying to flip it over. And so modern European style racing sailing yachts will have this massive keel pointing down into the water, which, I mean, one, can cause a lot of drag, but two, you have a really hard limit on the depth of water that you can sail those in without pulling the keel up or ripping the keel off. European, like, golden age of sail sort of stuff, you have, essentially, let's make a bigger hull and shape it such that if it tries to roll over, it'll try to roll itself back, and we'll pack the bottom of it with lead. The entire point of ballast is we'll weigh down the bottom of the ship, and then it won't roll over. And yeah, so the Pacific Islander general approach of the outrigger, or even getting into stuff like a catamaran, so you'll have a single outrigger and double outrigger, and an outrigger is essentially just a smaller boat hull on the end of some really long poles off to one side. A catamaran is if you make both boats the same size and just strap them together with some poles in between. And double outrigger is if you've got a small boat off to each side. Technically a trimaran. And the way that achieves balance and stability is what, it's like, you know, European ship design has all this stuff about, I'm trying to stand on one leg. If I make my shoes heavier, and if I nail this shoe to the ground, then I can stand up a little bit better. That'll be great. The Pacific Islander approach is to put the other foot down and stand on 2 feet. And when you consider that Pacific Islanders are really well set for sand beaches, where a lot of European ship design is based around pebble beaches, which is just incomprehensible to me as an Australian. But yeah, so if you balance it by having something that will also float at the end of a really long pole, and you know, if you've only got one, you put the heavy things on the side that the outrigger's on. You can even, like, stretch some nets across those poles and use that as a bit of extra deck space. And you just balance from that. You can have your ship, you have your boat/ship as shallow draft as you like, and it'll just balance because it is effectively 10 times wider. Yes, the whole, where is the line between single outrigger, catamaran, double outrigger, trimaran, all this sort of stuff is fascinatingly complicated, and I don't actually know where the lines are, but yeah, essentially a double outrigger canoe is a wooden trimaran, and the easiest way to flip over a double outrigger boat is actually from the front. They're usually easier to flip by pulling the back or front up, generally via big wave, than it is to do from the side. I mean, you could get it on land, but generally it's just big wave make boat go upside down. And yet, some of these can actually get fairly massive. Like, they are often termed canoes because of very specific things about construction and propulsion, but some of them are utterly massive. When you consider that they are designed for Pacific Island travel and exploration. And when you take the outrigger setup and use the poles for generating some extra deck space, as well as having a large central hull, you can get some real size on it, like proper sail the sky ocean with Aurelius Magnus sort of things. Now, one thing I'm finding fascinating with the flying today is that because of the way the wind is going and bouncing, it really doesn't want to hold a consistent trim and position. Like, you can see how much it's bouncing around, and that is very much not just me doing that. And yeah, the Islander boats in Hands of the Emperor at the Feet of the Sun, they're not just made up. Like, the one in the National Museum of Australia, I think it's actually a pretty good size for Kip's boat. Like, it is smaller than the traditional construction of that style would be, but I'm pretty sure Tuitonata was as well. Oh, is that what I think I see out to the left? Because, so off to the right here, we've got the coastline that we've been following. But then off to the left, I think that's more coastline. It's almost like we're coming up to the pointy tip of Australia. I'll see if I can find some pictures of the bigger outrigger boats made in the traditional methods and send them to you, because they're really cool things. Oh, I know one reason we'll be having such interesting winds. That's the Pacific Ocean, and that's the Gulf of Carpentaria. Yeah, we're getting into the air currents are not just hitting land and stopping sort of parts of things. Engine's still looking good, fuel levels are good. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. And of course, with a lot of the less populated areas, one thing I've found hilarious is that certain parts that we've been flying over, the Bing Maps feed has had pictures of clouds as part of the ground texture. This is one of the things about using Bing Maps instead of any more like specifically gathered mapping data. And it's definitely been a more interesting challenge doing the hand flying with this weather than I was expecting. I've gotten so used to the luxury of automation, so this has been nice. And it looks like we've got about 17 minutes until we get to the airport that we're, well, airstrip that we're flying to. We've left the anything even slightly capable of being called an international airport long behind us. I think the next one might be Darwin, if that one even counts. I've not actually looked up Darwin Airport, but that's a few more flights away yet. And yeah, I think that is definitely the Gulf of Carpentaria over there. So it is definitely the pointy bit. It is indeed named for Charles Darwin. And continuing the bits of World War II history that we've been getting into as we've flown up into the bits of Australia that were a lot more relevant to that actually happening, is that Darwin, a territory capital city on the Australian mainland, was bombed heavily by the Japanese in World War II. So the attacks on Pearl Harbor, we essentially got those, but hitting Portland, Oregon sort of thing instead. There's no good a translation into an American geographic context, but it's kind of like if Anchorage but tropical and actually connected to the main 48. That is a weird set of conversions. I can now see water in front of us as well. So the destination of Horn Island is... Oh, just glancing over at the map that is in the corner of the stream feed, but is in fact not one of the things that, of the many that is taking up screen real estate for me. Yeah, that's the end of mainland Australia just ahead of us. So yes, we are heading to Horn Island, which is one of the islands just off the tip of the pointy bit, just into the Torres Strait, because that had the largest airport-ish thing. So, of the tiny airstrips with a shred of parking around here, it had the longest airstrip. So we will be coming in on full general aviation visual flight rules. We've snuck down to 7,000 feet, but I think we might actually continue that since we're getting closer. Gulf of Carpentaria. I do not know that off the top of my head, and unlike the flights where I'm on autopilot all the time, I'm a little less capable of tabbing over to Google something for you. I feel like Gulf of Carpentaria is probably named after someone called Carpenter, but I'm honestly not sure on that one. Yes, I will delegate my research tasks to the trees. Ah, that makes sense. Here to the Carpentier, time Governor of General of Dutch East Indies, which is now Indonesia. Oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff named after Dutch dudes in this area. One of the big islands in the Gulf of Carpentaria is Groot Eiland. So, intensely Dutch spelling, including of island. We've just kept all of that. Yes, there is the alternate airstrip we were otherwise going to have been going to. I cannot remember the name of it because that is on several different screens, but I decided that one with a slightly longer runway. Oh yeah, we've got bouncing between 12 and 20 knot crosswind and 12 to 15 knot tailwind at the moment. It heckin' windy. So from here you can't quite see Papua New Guinea across the water, but it is a shorter jaunt across than you might otherwise think. Australia and PNG are actually really close. I mean, cultural ties gets more complicated. So, what is now Papua New Guinea, the eastern half of the island of New Guinea, started... So, until World War I, it was a German... Or it was 50-50 British and German colonial possession, with the western half of the island of New Guinea being held by the Dutch, and West Papua is currently part of Indonesia, but it shouldn't be, and there are... I think technically if I had said that in Indonesia, I would be arrested. Well, see, the German possession actually didn't cause any complications because the Australians just walked in and took it. Germany did not have the ability to defend any of its Pacific holdings in World War I. About half the islands that Japan went into World War II already owning, outside of the home islands, were actually German until World War I. Then the Japanese, who were allied with the British at the time, just came in and took all of the German holdings. Also, the Chinese city of Qingdao, which, yeah, you'll never guess that the Chinese city that's most famous for beer production is actually the one that was a German holding. Qingdao beer is a descendant of German colonialism that the Chinese have just run with. But yes, so West Papua being... Papua New Guinea is the name of the country that takes the eastern half of the island of New Guinea, and West Papua is the name of the country that should exist but is being violently held onto by Indonesia after some fraud and violent repressions. And so Papua New Guinea stopped being an Australian protectorate, we'll say, in 1975, which is more recent than you'd think. But there's still a lot of government, military, etc. ties between Papua New Guinea and Australia. My dad had to learn Tokpisin, which is the Papua New Guinea... official name, Papua New Guinea Pidgin English, although it is not actually a pidgin, it is a Creole, for work purposes. And so, you know how you get the weird little household phrases that just... This is what you say for this thing in the house, and it doesn't strike you as weird until you try to talk to somebody else about it. So, you know, the way that dinner would be announced at my house growing up is Emi time belang kisim kai kai. It is time to receive food in Tokpisin. And yes, Tokpisin is a Creole of English and Dutch and a wide scattering of native languages. And despite being called a pidgin, which is a type of language, it's actually a Creole. So a pidgin is a pidgin is a new language made from combining parts of other languages, usually for when you have cultural blending communities. It's the new melting pot language in new melting pot language in an area, and a Creole is very similar, except that you don't get native speakers of a pidgin. If when you get to the point where it's got native speakers, it's a Creole. But because it was called Papua New Guinea Pidgin English for so long, despite the fact that it is a full-blown Creole language that just exists on its own now, it's still just called that. And Tok Pisin is like Tok as in talk, but spelled T-O-K, and Pisin as in pigeon, but P-I-S-I-N. Okay. And here is Horn Island. And Horn Island Airport. And that tailwind has been pushing us faster than I thought. Attention passengers, we're now approaching Horn Island, and we have the seatbelt light on, which means I'd like your seatbelts to be fastened. Enjoy this riddle and more as we come in towards landing, and thank you again for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Approach checklist. Seatbelt lights on. Landing lights on. And giving a nice scout over the runway as we come through. Oh, we've got a choice of runways. How luxurious. Okay, so 3-2 is the short one, and 2-6 is the long one. Well, longish. The joys of doing the uncontrolled airport approach system. But we do have automated weather at this one. So, just checking in on the automated weather report system. And making sure to slow down. But it looks like we've got 16 knots, mostly headwind on runway 08. So we'll take a downwind. On island traffic, Martel 26 is on downwind for landing runway 08. Okay, fuel tank selectors both on. Fuel condition high idle. Prop RPM to max. Flaps. Now we are in safe for approach position. Inertial separator to bypass, and brakes confirm off. Approach checklist complete. Ooh, wind turbines. Making it a little interesting. But we'll get a little bit of distance from Horn Island so we can do a proper final approach. And of course, listening out on the traffic channel for anyone else who wants to come in and make a landing. Or otherwise to get onto the runway that we'd like to put ourselves on. Honestly, I'm just having to dodge them because they're very tall. I don't think Flight Sim has the scale on them right. Those seemed a bit chunky. But really, it's just... if I was getting close enough for them to have a wind turbulence effect, the turbulence would be of the crunchy kind. Port Island traffic, Martel 26, turning final approach, runway 08 to land. Okay, final approach checklist. Seatbelt lights on, flaps to landing position. Watching the airspeed. Autopilot is already off. I mean, am I wrong? And there's the runway. There's a lot of very fun, but slightly terrifying if you think about it, phrases in that category. So you get all this stuff about cumulus clouds and cumulonimbus clouds, but the most dangerous cloud for any type of aircraft is actually the cumulogranite, which is the type of cloud that secretly has a mountain in it. In space flights, you get... so, one of the ways you slow a spacecraft down is aerobraking. The thing where you come out of space a bit and the air pressure slows your spacecraft down, and you're just a little bit ahead of me. The worrying or always final mode of spacecraft braking is lithobraking. And there is the related term of rapid unplanned disassembly, or so-called exploding. When I was trying my hand at writing Kerbal Space Program fanfiction, the story I was publishing, I was using the title Rapid Unplanned Disassembly. Okay, we're coming in a little bit hot, but that's... okay, the automated weather thing said to expect 16 knots. We've currently got a 22 knot headwind on approach. I'm keeping the speed up a little bit because as that drops off, there we go. So it's now down to 14 knot headwind. It's not that the sensors are wrong, it's just that the sensors are at ground level. And here we go. Now that we're low enough that terrain effects on airflow are making it calmer, nicely, smoothly in. Plenty of runway, nice wide runway. Ease it down. Flaps up. Don't let it wander. And we're on the ground. Now, the fun thing about having a right-hand only joystick is that I also have a right-hand mouse. So if you see me awkwardly curling up like this, it's because I've put my left hand all the way across onto the joystick, and my right hand onto the mouse. And we've had no other talk on the traffic channel, so we can... Horn Island traffic, Martel 26, taxiing on the cross runway. The joys of smaller airports where the taxiway is just runway. But there's no way somebody would be trying to land on this one at the moment. Okay, after landing, checklist, wing flaps up, anti-ice off, standby, alt power off. Ooh, this one's a little bigger than the past couple of places. How fancy. Okay. Before arrival, taxi checklist. Parking brake set. Okay, so... taxi lights on, strobe light off, landing lights off. Seatbelt light on. Taxi clearance. Horn Island traffic, Martel 26 is clear of the runway. Not much in the way of taxi clearances here. Initial separator bypass. Prop RPM to minimum. Fuel condition, low idle. And parking brake release. I think that one over there looks like a good parking spot for us. Lovely. Parking brake set. Okay. Shutdown checklist. Parking brake set. Power lever all the way to idle. Lead air heat switch off. Oh, we've actually got another plane coming in to land. Temperature range stable. Prop RPM to minimum. Fuel condition cut. External lights off. Seatbelt light off. Attention passengers, this now concludes our flight from Lockhart River to Horn Island, and we here at Martel Air hope you've enjoyed your time in our tiny skybus. Please wait until I've opened the door and you can calmly deplane in an orderly fashion. Our baggage handling services today will be provided by our wonderful passengers, so thank you for not leaving any of your luggage behind. Any personal belongings left behind as you leave the plane will be assumed to be a present to the co-pilot and enjoyed thoroughly. And don't forget on your way out that there is a Ko-fi machine in the back of the plane for those who'd like to support Wing Commander Lamington's dog treats habit. Thank you for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Okay, shutdown checklist continues. Internal lighting off. Fuel boost switch off. NG check. Avionics 2 off. Avionics 1 off. Battery switch off. And fuel tank selectors both off. Shutdown checklist complete. So, thank you for your company as we get to the very tip of the northernmost part of Australia and just slightly off it to land on an island off the mainland. One thing about flying manually all the time, flying manually for a whole flight, I need to remember to put my drink on the opposite side to the joystick. If I'm always operating the joystick, I can't be operating the beverage. I know that's not what they mean by don't drink and drive, but it still applies. We've got our very pretty plane out amongst the interesting smattering of buildings here on Horn Island in the Torres Strait. I hope you've enjoyed the stream after a couple of weeks off. I will be away next week because I have a major event to attend to and help run. My medical group is doing a fairly large event an hour to the north of me, and I've agreed to be in charge of one aspect of it, so that's exciting, mildly terrifying, and it's going to take up the entire weekend. But thank you for both your company and Piney Tree, especially your encouragement. And I will see you for the next flight as we start south again, but down the other side of the pointy bit.